have been circulating in the past few days, casting insinuations on ICICI Bank and its MD and CEO. Similar rumors had first surfaced in mid-2016 and had been appropriately responded to at that stage. Nevertheless, these have been resurfaced in the recent past to malign the reputation of the bank and the MD and its CEO. In this context, the board of ICICI Bank yesterday reviewed the internal processes of the bank and had also details of the exposure to the Videocon group. Let me first explain the process adopted by the ICICI Bank to sanction the loan to the Videocon group. In 2012, a consortium of over 20 banks and financial institutions sanctioned facilities to the Videocon group, that is Videocon Industries Limited, and 12 of its subsidiaries, associates as co-obligors for a debt consolidation program and for the group's oil and gas capital expenditure program aggregating to approximately 40,000 crores. ICICI Bank's current exposure to the Videocon group is part of this syndicated consortium arrangement. ICICI Bank was not the lead bank for this consortium, and the bank only sanctioned its share of the facilities aggregating to approximately 3,250 crores, which were less than 10% of the total consortium facility in April 2012. After the preparation of the information memorandum and the initial due diligence for the financing program by the lead arrangers, and after the sanction of the facilities by the lead bank, the credit committee of the ICICI Bank in 2012 sanctioned its share of facilities in the syndicated arrangements to the Videocon group. This committee was chaired by the then chairman of the ICICI Bank, and it included independent and working directors of the bank. It is important to note that Mrs. Chanda Kochhar was not the chairperson of this committee. The terms and conditions offered for these loans are similar to those offered by other banks in the consortium, ruling out the possibility of any special benefit to the borrower by the ICICI Bank. I repeat, the terms and conditions offered for these loans by ICICI Bank are similar to those offered by other banks of the consortium, who account for 90% of the loan amount. We are only under 10%, ruling out the possibility of any special benefit to the borrower by ICICI Bank. It is important to note here that all banks, including ICICI Bank, disbursed the rupee term loan into a common escrow pool account being maintained for this purpose by the lead bank. So it was not even the disbursement was made directly by the bank to the Videocon group. It went into a escrow pool account, and from where it was disbursed. ICICI Bank's share of the banking sector's exposure to the Videocon group was less than 10%, while around 90% of the loans were sanctioned by other banks and financial institutions on same terms. I would further like to add that ICICI Bank's share of exposure has reduced in percentage terms and is now lesser than what it was a few years ago. On the basis of the above information, the board concluded that there is no question or scope of any favoritism, nepotism, or quid pro quo on the part of its managing director. Given this architecture of sanctioning all loans by the credit committee comprising of independent directors, no individual employee, howsoever may be his or her position, has the ability to influence the decision on credit given by the bank. I would also like to expressly clarify that none of the investors of New Power Renewables are borrowers of ICICI Bank. We have also been receiving some questions from various quarters in this regard, and let me proactively address them now. Mrs. Kochhar was a part of the credit committee which sanctioned these loan facilities to the Videocon group. The board does not see as a conflict of interest in any manner, since Videocon group is not an investor in New Power Renewables. Hence, there was no need to recluse herself from this committee. As mentioned earlier, this committee had many independent directors and the committee was not chaired by her. Moreover, it was a part of a consortium arrangement where terms and conditions had already been agreed upon by the consortium. The question has been asked as to, did she make the necessary disclosures to the company? I would like to state that she has been making all her disclosures in accordance with the regulatory guidelines under the Companies Act and the Banking Act. There have also been questions raised as to whether regulators reached out to us for queries. I would like to clearly state that we have satisfactorily replied to the questions of all the regulators, which is an ongoing process between a regulated entity like a bank and the regulators and other government departments. However, this is a privileged information between the regulators and the bank, and it would be totally inappropriate for me to go public with them. That's the prerogative of the regulators to decide on the issue. The company, therefore, is not in a position to share any specific details about any questions or queries by the regulators. I hope with all this, I have been able to answer all your queries. I would strongly urge all of you not to spell rumors around this issue or this topic, which mars the reputation of the bank or its MD and CEO. Thank you very much.
So we have a question that are you ICICI Bank aware about this conflict of interest? क्या ICICI Bank को पता था कि conflict of interest है? शर्मा साहब ये बताइए क्या ICICI Bank को पता था कि conflict of interest है? और साहब ये बताएं कि बोर्ड कैसे क्लियर कर सकता है? क्या इंटरनल इंक्वायरी नहीं हो सकती? क्या आप लोग इंटरनल इंक्वायरी नहीं कर सकते? क्लीन शीट आपने दे दी है conflict of interest लिखे हुए। शर्मा साहब जवाब दीजिए इसका। शर्मा साहब।
It was the management at ICICI Bank clearly clarifying the facts, talking about the fact that they have full faith in the MD and CEO, and with all the news flow going around. I would like to just say sum up essentially what has come in. So firstly, the chairman completely defends the MD and CEO. He very clearly said that no one individual can impact any credit loan that they are giving. 90% of the loans are sanctioned by ICICI Bank are by other banks. This is specifically for the Videocon case. Also mentioned that there were certain disclosures that are needed, and these disclosures were being made on a time-to-time basis as far as Ms. Kochhar is concerned. ICICI Bank was not the lead bank as far as this exposure to Videocon is concerned. There were no special benefits to borrowers of ICICI Bank. ICICI Bank was not Videocon, largely it's a part of a consortium right now, and they are looking forward to what can happen over there. Share of the exposure to Videocon reduced in percentage term. No individual can influence the credit decisions. Basically setting that there are systems and processes which are there in place, and that cannot be influenced by any one or two individuals. Let's get in some perspective regarding. Okay, Sriram Subramaniam is now with us on the phone line, founder and MD at InGovern. So what do you make of this clarification? A lot was going around as to what's happening. That's why this clarification was necessary from ICICI?
No, I think, I mean, obviously this is like playing to the press in that sense, but as a bank, I mean, it is imperative that have they made the necessary related party transactions involving a KMP? That is not clear. I mean, nobody knew about this until this came out in the press. I mean, so the fact that while the credit decisions cannot be influenced by single individuals, but the fact that it has been given to a related party, itself should have been a disclosure then.
What do you think about the clarification that has come in now? Okay, they have not given the disclosure earlier, but they very clearly said that there were some disclosures which were needed, and the chairman, the MD, that is Chanda Kochhar, has given those disclosures.
No, when have they given those? Chanda Kochhar has given those disclosures.
Right, I think they did not mention about the timeline, but they said on a timely basis disclosures were given to them.
To the board. That is not sufficient enough. The disclosure should have been given. The Companies Act is very clear that disclosures of related party transactions should be made to shareholders, and that has not been made. And Chanda Kochhar is a KMP, I mean, in the definition of KMP, and her husband is a related party, and in the definition of related party, and that disclosure has not been made to the shareholders. And so the company is in violation of the Companies Act, period, and the LODR guidelines, and that is a fact. And so the company and the board is culpable on that count.
Right. What do you make of the fact that they are clearly saying that any one individual cannot have an impact on the credit decision? What would you want to say about that?
But maybe so. Let us believe them on that count. But yet, I mean, the fact that why hasn't the disclosure not been made, and who is accountable for that all these years? And so somebody should take the proprietor, be held responsible for it. Somebody should. There is this one of propriety, and if the board cannot act as yes men and just go ahead with what the CEO and the MD has to say, or this one, even what the credit committee has to say. Irrespective of that, the board did not make, and the company did not make the disclosure. And that is, and the company is culpable on that count. And propriety calls that this one. Today also, have they disclosed, why didn't in today's press conference the ICICI Bank come out and disclose that these are the loans granted to all related parties by the bank? They have not made those disclosures, and this was as opportune moment as any in the past.
Right, but what do you make of the overall commentary that came in, how board is trying to back their MD with the news flow that is coming around? What would be your first reaction to that?
That's what the board is accountable to shareholders. It's not accountable to the MD, and so the board is acting like a man of the MD, which is a sad thing, which is a complete the water down of all governance norms. The board is.
Right. So also I would just like to, just like to highlight the point that you were making earlier. You were saying this is a golden opportunity to disclose other related party transactions, if any.
Related party transactions, if any. I mean, today one is out of the cupboard, the skeleton, one skeleton. Why not many more?
Right, Sriram. Thank you so much for taking out time for us and giving us your first reaction on this important press conference. Let's go across to my colleague Neha. She attended the press conference, tried to get the management bike to try to put some questions to them. Neha, what were the key takeaways?
Pankaj, a lot of disappointment here. We expected this to be a media interaction. The company's chairperson was here, M.K. Sharma was here. We thought he'll take some of our questions regarding the statement issued by the bank yesterday. However, none of the questions by the media were entertained, and the statement issued yesterday was pretty much the line ICICI Bank stuck to today as well, saying that as far as the entire matter is concerned, there was an internal review conducted by ICICI Bank, and they found Chanda Kochhar to be absolutely on the clean side. In fact, they said that as far as the board is concerned, they repose full faith and confidence in her leadership abilities. And they also clarified details pertaining to the loans extended to Videocon, saying that these loans were extended and were part of a bank consortium that includes 20 other banks. And they said that ICICI Bank has just about 10% share as far as the total loan exposure is concerned, close to about 3,200 crore rupees. And they said that the terms and conditions offered by ICICI Bank to Videocon were not different from those offered by other banks, thereby saying that as far as all allegations of nepotism are concerned, they said it does not stand ground, and said that the internal review indicated there was no scope for any favoritism or nepotism or any conflict of interest as far as this particular loan transaction is concerned. In fact, they said that all requisite disclosures had been made by their MD and CEO, Chanda Kochhar, also stating that any interaction they are having with the regulators at this point is a private matter and they cannot divulge those details unless the regulator chooses to. They said that it's all part of normal business at ICICI Bank to entertain certain disclosures that the regulator might be asking for, certain information that the regulator might be asking for, and all these have been adequately responded to and provided to the regulator as and when the regulator sought these details. However, they said that these cannot be shared with the public, considering that these are very private in nature between the regulator and the bank, and basically saying once again what they said in the statement yesterday, that the bank wants to quell all these malicious rumors doing the rounds once and for all, and the board coming out strongly in favor of their MD and CEO Chanda Kochhar and reposing full faith and confidence in her leadership abilities to run the bank, and also relying on her wisdom as far as all these transactions are concerned.
Neha, also, just the point that you were making, that the statement that they have made today is not different from the press release that they had given, or broadly on the similar lines?
Yes, Pankaj, the statement issued yesterday was pretty much similar to what the management said to us today. In fact, it seemed to be a reiteration of what was communicated yesterday. This time, of course, the ICICI Bank chairman chose to share those details with us. However, he refused to take any questions from us journalists present here, and in fact, we did try asking him questions. Many of my colleagues did raise a couple of questions. However, they were not responded to. And so clearly, all we have at this point is the statement that was issued yesterday and which was again reiterated by the management today. There was not much added to that, to put simply.
Right, Neha, thank you so much for giving us live updates from there. Just wanted to reiterate, there was a press conference that happened from ICICI Bank. Everybody thought they will take questions, they will talk about what's happening, but nothing of that did come out. They did make a statement, and they said that no special benefits to ICICI borrowers are given by ICICI Bank. In terms of 90% of the loans, 90% of the loan exposure to Videocon is from other banks. Less than 10% is from ICICI Bank, what they are talking about. 90% of the sanctioned loans are from other banks. Very clearly, they pointed out that, it's a process-driven system, and no one individual, whether it's the MD, the CEO, or the chairman, can influence a big loan in any way. So they very clearly pointed out that it's a system that they follow, and no individual can follow that. The credit committee, which actually went ahead and approved this loan, was not chaired by Chanda Kochhar, also saying that Chanda Kochhar has made all the necessary disclosures on a timely manner. At this point of time, they have also conducted an internal inquiry, and they don't feel that there is a conflict of interest that essentially they have done. And that's essentially, what was the key takeaway. The credit committee approved the disbursal, and then essentially, they largely got this done. Neha, when you went into the press conference, of course, you've given up the sum up of what has happened. What sort of expectations you had? What sort of questioning do you think that they would have answered? Or, what clarification did you think should essentially have come?
Essentially, Pankaj, a lot has been doing the rounds. In fact, a couple of years back as well, there were reports pertaining to loans around the Videocon group. Of course, we expected the management to take some of our questions and also to enlighten us to some details, if perhaps only to quell the rumors that are doing the rounds. But ICICI Bank pretty much stuck to the script, choosing to divulge only what they released in the statement yesterday, which is pretty much on the lines of the fact that the bank, despite all these malicious attempts to malign the reputation of the bank, has found these allegations to be untrue after an internal audit, an internal review that points out and comes to the conclusion that there was no scope for any favoritism or nepotism when it came to extending loans to Videocon, for example. And in fact, they also stated, as you also highlighted moments back, that the internal audit indicated that there was no scope for any individual whatsoever to influence a decision as far as lending is concerned, or as far as a borrower's rating and terms and conditions of the loan are concerned. So clearly, ICICI Bank at this point standing very strongly behind Chanda Kochhar and saying that all these reports that have been doing the rounds recently and which have resurfaced after a couple of years are malicious in intent. And of course, the management said that as far as the board is concerned, they are very strongly in favor of all decisions taken by Chanda Kochhar and see no scope for any conflict of interest that may have arisen. And they've also said that based on internal audits they have done, there really seems to be no scope for any favoritism or any give and take or any nepotism allegations that have been doing the rounds. They've quelled all these allegations, saying that their internal audit done by their employees at their bank has found no discrepancies whatsoever, and there's no red flag whatsoever. And they really say that they stand behind their MD and CEO and repose full faith and confidence in their MD and CEO, Chanda Kochhar.
Neha, this has been the big highlight over the last few days. Yesterday evening, they gave out their press release, and now they gave press conference, essentially, which raised the hopes that essentially what will they say, how will they say, and how would they like to defend. But, they did not take any questions from the media, which probably people thought they would, and just clarified the point that, less than 10% of their exposure to the Videocon group is 10% or less than 10% comes in from their credit committee, which they had was not chaired by Chanda Kochhar, which actually approved this loan. And currently this loan, or the status of this loan, is under a consortium that they have. Plus, after the rumors that came out around this level, they did an internal inquiry, and they found that, there was no favoritism or any conflict of interest that could have been coming in. And very importantly, pointing out that no one individual can impact any credit process or credit loan that essentially people are talking about. Neha, this conflict of interest, what's happened to process, what happens to various things, do you think that there would be more clarifications which will be needed over a period of time?
Well, we journalists have a lot of questions for sure, and as far as clarifications are concerned, it's difficult to guess, but at this point, ICICI Bank has pretty much said what it wants to share, and we would hope that they have another detailed press conference with perhaps their MD and CEO regarding this. But as of now, as far as ICICI Bank is concerned, they are very thorough with what they have said. They have pretty much stuck to what they said earlier in the statement released last evening. And there was not much detail added to that today when the management interacted with us, or rather shared what once again was a kind of reiteration of what we heard yesterday in form of a statement from ICICI Bank. In fact, at the beginning of the conference, we were told that many of the questions would be answered by the management. However, many questions are unanswered, of course. And what we do know for sure at this point is that ICICI Bank has a board that is very unanimous in its support for their MD and CEO, Chanda Kochhar, and they say that they have done a thorough inquiry at the internal level, and they have found no loopholes as far as the entire corporate governance structure is concerned in terms of disclosures required by their management, because they say that all requisite disclosures required at all points of time have been shared as and when required, and they see no loopholes in that, they see no gaps in that. And furthermore, they say that they have cooperated with regulatory intervention at all points. And in fact,
Right, Neha. Thank you so much for giving us update and essentially what came out of that important press conference. We're taking